Hey everybody, Professor Moore here. So over the past few years, we've seen an organized conservative effort to ban the accurate and factual teaching of American history in public schools. Republicans across the country want to whitewash and erase certain parts of our history, such as the history of indigenous people or the history of slavery and white supremacy. Just today, an op-ed was published in The Guardian titled, "Curriculum Restrictions in U.S. Public Schools Hurt Teachers and Students Alike." And the authors note that as of right now, 20 states have passed bills banning the discussion of race in the classroom and limiting what can be taught about slavery. We've also seen an effort to get books that discuss the true history of slavery banned from public schools. When it comes to good books that discuss the real history of slavery, there are many. I would recommend The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptist. I would recommend Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram Kendi. These are both great resources on the true history of slavery, and these are exactly the kind of books that conservatives are scared of and are trying to get rid of. However, these are not the books that I want to talk about right now. I want to recommend some good books on the history of slavery and racism, but these books are primary sources, meaning that they are historical documents from the past. In fact, I have a challenge for you. I want to challenge you to read 10 books, 10 primary sources on slavery and racism. So here are the 10 books to put on your reading list, and you can see that these all come from the Penguin Classics collection. And full disclosure, I have nothing to do with Penguin, no association whatsoever. I just really like these Penguin Classic books because they contain really important primary sources, and they always have an expert in the field introduce those sources and provide the necessary historical context and significance. You can find these books at your local bookstore, and most of them are online for free. However, I'm old school and I prefer to have the actual copy in my hand, but either way is perfectly fine. I know 10 books sounds like a lot, but take your time. If it takes a few weeks, that's fine. If it takes a few months, perfect. If it takes 1-2 years, no problem. But I promise you, after you read these 10 books, not only are you going to know more about the true history of slavery and racism in this country, you will never be able to look at American history the same ever again. So what I want to do now is briefly introduce the 10 books I'm challenging you to read, and in later videos, I'll take a deeper dive and go into more detail about each of these books. Book number 1 on the list is The Interesting Narrative of Olaudah Equiano, published in 1789. Now, this was one of the first memoirs published by someone who had experienced the Atlantic slave trade firsthand. In the book, Equiano describes how he and his sister were kidnapped when they were children from their home in modern-day Nigeria. He describes being thrown into the cargo hold of a slave ship. He describes being sold into slavery in Virginia and then eventually going to Britain where he gained his freedom. And that's where he dedicated the rest of his life to the cause of abolitionism. Book number 2 on the list is 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northrup, published in 1853. This book tells the story of a free black man that was kidnapped in Washington, D.C. and sold into slavery on a plantation in Louisiana. Now, you might have seen the 2013 film 12 Years a Slave, which I think is phenomenal, but nothing comes close to hearing the words of Solomon Northrup for yourself. Book number 3 on the list is Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs, published in 1861. This is a memoir that was written by Jacobs after she escaped slavery in North Carolina, and it reveals a side of slavery that is often not talked about enough, which is the constant sexual violence that enslaved black women faced from their white enslavers. I don't know if I have ever read a book quite like this, and it completely blew me away. Book number 4 on the list is The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, published in 1850. Now, this book gives a unique look at slavery in the North, and it includes some of her most famous speeches, such as "Ain't I a Woman?" Book number 5 is Clotel by William Wells Brown, published in 1853. Brown was a Black American who escaped slavery and became an extremely popular abolitionist, and he's known for being the first Black American to publish a novel. The book follows the story of many enslaved people, including the daughter of Thomas Jefferson and his slave Sally Hemings. The book is not a traditional narrative and adopts an experimental approach, and it is completely unforgettable. Book number 6 is the portable Frederick Douglass. Now, not only does this book include his memoir of his enslavement and his escape, but it includes some of his most famous speeches, including my favorite, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." I promise you that whenever you read something written by Frederick Douglass, it is going to be a transformative experience. Every single one of his writings should be mandatory reading for all Americans. Book number 7 is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, published in 1852. Now, this book was one of the most popular abolitionist works of the 19th century, and it is still extremely powerful today. Some people criticize the book for being overly sentimental, but I believe that it shows a righteous rage and a humanity that is needed now just as much as it was needed then. Book number 8 is the complete writings of Phyllis Wheately. Phyllis Wheately was an enslaved Black woman who published a poetry book in the late 1700s that gained her national fame. This book challenged the prevalent stereotype that enslaved people were inferior and could not produce art. And if you've never read any of Wheatley's poems, you are in for a treat because they are haunting and absolutely beautiful. Book number 9 is The Light of Truth by Ida B. Wells, which contains her anti-lynching journalism from the 1890s and the 1900s. Ida B. Wells is one of my heroes for her unflinching journalism of America's racial terrorism. There will never be another voice like Ida B. Wells. In this book, you'll confront the true history of white supremacist terrorism. The last book on the list is The Soul of Black Folks by W.E.B. Du Bois, published in 1903. Du Bois is one of the most important intellectuals and scholars of American history, and I guarantee that every single essay of his that you read is going to get you critically thinking about American history and looking at our past in a different light. Now, I know 10 books sounds like a lot, but I promise you, once you start this journey, you are not going to want to stop. By reading these books, you're helping to keep true American history alive. So let's get reading.